This story is insane. So 2 days ago, Nintendo announced a remake of a game that many would argue is the greatest game ever made, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This was the biggest moment of Nintendo's long-awaited Nintendo Direct, and while some people online went wild, Nintendo's own stock fell off a cliff, shedding as much as 10% in a single day. Think about that for a second. The single safest, most beloved thing Nintendo could possibly announce, and the people with real money on the line sprinted for the exit. Why? Because frankly, they're not excited for 1998. They were waiting for something new, a new flagship game or a new 3D Mario, and a remaster of a remaster quietly told them that that isn't coming for probably over a year. But here's what should actually bother gamers more than any stupid stock price. Even the safe pick wasn't actually safe at all. The new art style revealed for Ocarina of Time has split the fan base right down the middle. Half are calling it gorgeous while the other half are saying it doesn't look like Zelda at all. And what's even worse though is that there is a single detail on Link's hand in that trailer that flat out did not exist in the original. And this is scary for true Zelda fans because nobody can agree on whether it's a mistake, a retcon, or Nintendo rewriting its own history. I mean, Nintendo might have accidentally just revealed that they are gambling with the most beloved game in Zelda history. So let's dive in and figure out what exactly is going on with this stock crash, a new pricing controversy, if you can believe it, and what this Zelda remake actually tells us about where Nintendo is headed. So the story begins 2 days ago on June 9th with Nintendo's most recent Nintendo Direct presentation, the first one that they've had showing their own games in like 9 months. So this was heavily anticipated, and we covered this extensively in my last video. If you missed that, go ahead and check it out. But 2026 is the 40th year anniversary of the Legend of Zelda franchise, and Ocarina of Time ended up closing the show for this Nintendo Direct. And what they showed was a minute and 37 seconds of a trailer that had actually no gameplay at all. In fact, it doesn't even have a release date. They just said it's coming out this year, and we already knew that. This was like a super leaked reveal, which kind of made the reaction to this trailer probably a little bit more numb than it should have been. But on June 9th, at the same time that Nintendo was revealing this massive remake that everybody is supposed to be excited about, the stock price for Nintendo fell as much as 12% from the peak to the low, and has only barely recovered since to $11 a share. Now this is in the US market. Of course, Nintendo is a Japanese company, so this did also occur in the Japanese yen as well. But it's crazy, you can literally see the exact moment, if we're looking at the Japanese stock price, the exact moment that the stock tanked once the Japanese market opened. The stock fell about 8.5% in the Japanese market, and as I said before, from peak to low about 12% for the US. Reuters reports Nintendo shares slump as games pipeline disappoints markets, and this headline hits the nail right on the head, because the problem isn't necessarily Ocarina of Time as a remake, because as I said, lots of gamers are actually super excited about this remake, myself included. I'm a huge Zelda fan. I said this in my last video, but I even beat Ocarina of Time on the 3DS, so that itself is not the problem. Everybody knows it's going to sell a ton of units. It's probably even going to sell consoles depending on what we see at the end of the year in terms of pricing and things like that. But the article reports here that Nintendo shares fell 7.5% on Wednesday after the company's Nintendo Direct presentation of forthcoming games lacked titles from top franchises such as Super Mario. And this is one of the things that a lot of people on like Twitter, for example, they get very defensive of Nintendo and say, oh, you're only complaining, all you care about is Mario. It's like, well, look, I mean, honestly, kind of a lot of people only care about Mario. Like, that's really the bitter truth about this whole thing, is like games like Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon built Nintendo to what they are. That is irrefutable, and you cannot deny that. And so you can't be upset when people buy a $500 console and say, hey, I want the new Mario from the guys that make Mario. Like, well, that's like somebody saying, oh, the only thing you care about at Domino's Pizza is the pizza. Don't you know they have cheesy bread and salads? It's like, yeah, but like I'm going to Domino's Pizza for the what are we talking about? Anyway, the article goes on to say a lack of a mainline 3D Mario for this year's holiday shopping season is, quote, commercially meaningful, end quote. Jefferies analyst Atul Goyal wrote in a client note. Sorry if I mispronounced that name. He continues by saying a year or two now enters the holiday window without a franchise title of comparable pull to Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. And look, I literally called this in my last video. As soon as the Nintendo Direct happened, I made a video saying, guys, this actually isn't what people wanted. And by that, I mean the casual audience. The majority of people that own a Switch do not have a Switch 2 yet. I know everyone's been talking online about, oh my God, Switch 2 fastest selling console ever. That's true. But the Switch 1 has sold 155 million units and the Switch 2 is at like what, 20 million or 22 million, something like that. So there's 130 million more units out there that investors are looking for them to sell. And those people aren't buying a Switch 2 yet because they don't see something that they want, mainly a new 3D Mario, a new Pokemon, or a new Zelda. There's other franchises like Smash Bros. We already know that's probably not coming till 28 or at the very minimum. I called that last year, okay, because we knew about Kirby Air Riders and Sakurai's development pipeline and all that stuff. But the point is, I'm trying not to do like the I told you so thing, but like as soon as the Direct happened, I said, guys, people aren't going to be happy about this. I know we love Ocarina of Time as gamers, and the proof is in the pudding. I mean, like the adults in the room with actual money on the line just agreed with me, and I'm not some sort of prophet. It doesn't take like a genius to realize this, right? Anybody outside of the hardcore Nintendo niche could see this coming from a mile away. As good as Ocarina of Time is, people are looking for something new from the new Nintendo console, and the new experiences we do have are Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, which are a year old already. Oh, and Pokopia, which they announced a $35 DLC, by the way, which is half the cost of the entire game. Maybe I'll talk about that later in this video, but all that being said, I think Nintendo really thought Ocarina of Time was the safest play here, and it's kind of backfiring because, as this article states here, Switch 2 Zelda Ocarina of Time remake has some fans regretting what they wished for. Has Nintendo, quote, hired this man for an Unreal Engine 5 reimagining? And once again, I don't mean to say I told you so, but I literally pointed out in my video as soon as the Direct ended that the art style for this game is probably gonna be a problem. It took all of 2 seconds looking at the trailer to understand that, and I'm not sitting here saying that the art style is bad or that everyone hates it. What I am saying is that there is a chunk of the community that genuinely is unsettled by this art direction, and there's good reason for them to feel that way. Now the article goes on to explain the meme here, saying we've seen Unreal Engine 5 Ocarina of Time remakes that take full advantage of the software's tools for achieving realism and lighting effects, and also more stylized Unreal Engine 5 remakes. In both cases, videos have received comments of, quote, Nintendo hire this man, end quote, which has turned the phrase into a popular meme. Now that the wait is over and an official Ocarina of Time remake is coming for Switch 2, some fans are worrying what they might have unleashed. Based on the short glimpse of Link, some fans have concerns about the game's art style, while some are impressed by the painterly composition and detailed textures in the scene and looking forward to seeing them in 4K. Others are worried that Nintendo has taken the calls for an Unreal Engine 5 remake a bit too seriously. Quote, if you look at this and the new Star Fox, Nintendo are seriously starting to hire that man, one fan commented on X, referring to the meme. So let's not take the article's word for it. Let's just jump on over to Twitter and see if there's any actual traction here. And we'll start here with Krista Yang, who is, as many of you know, a former employee of Nintendo of America and also has, I believe, a podcast or a show with another former Nintendo employee, Kit. And her first reaction was feeling mixed, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. So if a former Nintendo employee is feeling this way, it's not unreasonable for the fans of the franchise to feel that way as well. This person literally just says, ew, what the top comment tried to catch him saying, must complain about everything for likes online, and they got brutally ratioed, saying you're literally paying the website for more attention. And this is why I just don't engage on Twitter anymore. It's actual freaks, like it's actual just total lunatics. I can't do it, right? I browse it for news and for memes, but it's just such a bad social media website. This user says he looks like a hobbit. Why does every remake have to strip away the unique art style the original iteration had? It's clear that they only care about showing off the Switch 2's graphical capabilities with no intention of capturing the original vision. Somebody thought they were slick by saying unique art style, and they said yes. And like, look, somebody like this is being intellectually dishonest, right? I mean, if you don't think that there's an original art style to Ocarina of Time, like tell me you don't play Zelda without telling me you don't play Zelda. Everyone knows what they meant by this comment here. This user says, wow, the new Ocarina of Time remake looks like the shitty fan-made Unreal Engine projects. That's what I said in my video. This user actually breaks down the art style situation perfectly, showing the original art design and the modern design and how the original art was interpreted on the 64 versus the 3DS. And then we look at the modern design and there's no correlation here. It's just a homunculus named Greg, right? Like, what even is this? And then we've got lots of users saying the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 2026, and they're just sharing what is basically AI generated footage of a 3D Mario game, and it looks like absolute garbage. 12,000 likes, 235,000 views, by the way. Here's another one. This is what the Ocarina of Time remake looks like, and it is, again, it's sort of a AAA Mario AI game footage type of thing. 5.6 thousand likes, 173,000 views. And we even have users trying to defend the new art style, saying it's going to be funny when these folks saying that the Ocarina of Time remake is going to be, quote, unreal slop realistic, find out that the game's graphics are way closer to those Nintendo renders that have existed for years. And they got quote tweeted saying the way it just doesn't look like either of these at all. And it's true. I'm really struggling to figure out what the original poster was getting at here, because the images that they used kind of proved their own point to be wrong. Like, the new Link looks absolutely nothing like the old Link design. What are we doing? Like, are we looking at the same Link here? Like, what is this? Again, being intellectually dishonest just to come to the defense of Nintendo, and everyone can see right through it immediately. It's kind of embarrassing. And beyond all of these tweets, when I mentioned that I was unsure about the art style in my last video, tons of you went down in the comments saying, yes, finally somebody is saying what I'm thinking, because frankly, lots of people feel this way. There's just many people on YouTube are just too scared to actually say it, I think. Or maybe they are, and I'm just missing their comments. I don't know. And just to tie this all together with what I said earlier regarding the big stock market drop that we saw for Nintendo stock, it's not that people hate the Ocarina of Time remake or that they don't want it or they won't pay for it or whatever. It's that we are in the era of the remake. We see it with Star Fox, Halo, Tomb Raider, now Zelda, and it just feels like these gaming companies, and in particular Nintendo with the Switch 2, are cashing in on nostalgia, and they're more so looking in the rear view mirror rather than what's coming down the pipeline. And that's what has investors upset, because if you're just relying on what you did years ago, then that shows a lack of innovation. And I'm not saying that Nintendo's not going to release some absolute stellar games for the Switch 2 eventually. Surely they will, but we don't know that right now. All we know is Winds and Waves is coming next year. We don't know anything about a new Zelda or Mario, and those are the big flagship franchises on the Nintendo consoles, whether we want to admit that or not. So it's kind of giving creatively bankrupt, right? Like, they're out of ideas. And as an investor, or even as a fan of Nintendo, like, that's not what you want to see or hear. You don't want confirmation that, okay, maybe they are kind of out of ideas right now, or the pipeline is at least clogged up and we're just waiting on the new stuff and we don't even know when it's coming. But beyond the art style of Ocarina of Time remake, there's actually two other really big problems that were revealed with this Nintendo Direct. And since we're already talking about Ocarina of Time, let's start with that one, because the other one has to do with pricing across multiple of their games. Shocker, I know that we're talking about Nintendo making horrible pricing decisions again, but this is kind of a new one. All right, so we'll talk about that in just a second. But sticking with the Zelda Ocarina of Time remake, this user tweeted, weird detail, but Link shouldn't have the Triforce of Courage here. That happens after Ganondorf gets into the Sacred Realm and the Triforce splits, so Link doesn't have it until he's adult Link. Are they changing the story, I guess? Or maybe just visualizing the Triforce already choosing him? And I think these are reasonable questions to pose after seeing this trailer, but it's also reasonable to have a little bit of uneasiness when you see something like this, because it's kind of confirmation that they're not sticking to the source material. Whether that's good or bad, I think a lot of people, you know, when you're looking at Ocarina of Time, I think deviating too far from the source material is gonna rub a lot of people the wrong way, especially because I don't think, and you guys can let me know in the comments, but I don't think we know who's developing the Ocarina of Time remake. Is it Nintendo themselves? Are they outsourcing it like they did with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl? I know that's technically Game Freak outsourcing it, but you get my point. And it could genuinely just be that they chose to do this for the trailer so they can kind of symbolize, like, oh yeah, Link's the chosen one and that's part of the story of Ocarina of Time, whatever. It's also the case that I believe in Skyward Sword, this kind of was retconned officially, so maybe they're just going off of the new retcon timeline. Now, I'm a bit fuzzy on this, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure in Skyward Sword it was sort of retconned that the Triforce mark will appear on those chosen by the goddess even before they actually possess the relic. Okay, so perhaps that explains what's going on here. Surely that's a much better explanation than whoever's developing this just not actually being familiar with the source material, because that would be worst case scenario. And I think that's why there's some people feeling a little bit weird about this. Okay, so this might not be a big deal, but it could be a huge deal, which is why I'm bringing it up. And when we learn more about Ocarina of Time, I'm sure the question will be answered, and I'll probably cover it here on the channel. So if you don't want to miss that, subscribe down below. But the last thing that was revealed during this Nintendo Direct that should have a lot of people feeling uncomfortable has actually been shared by quite a few people, but I saw it posted by Spawnwave over on Twitter saying, Fire Emblem is $80 physically. And here you can see again, Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. We saw more about that game during the Nintendo Direct, and for physical it is $80, that's US dollars, and it is $70 for digital. And this is actually a really big deal because this is Nintendo doubling down and confirming that, one, variable pricing does still exist, it is still real, and two, what we saw with Yoshi was not a digital discount but instead is a physical tax. And there was much debate about that with Yoshi, but now the debate is over. We know that no, the prices are not lower, they are actually just higher for physical, and Yoshi was priced variably lower because the game is super short. Unless you're gonna 100% it, it's probably like 6 to 8 hours, not even. And so this begs the question, like, all right, if they're doing this with Fire Emblem, then we all know they're doing this with Zelda, right? Like, you know it, I know it, everyone knows it. There's gonna be a limited collector's edition. There might even be a Switch 2 variant. I doubt that. That's too much work. Nintendo's not going to do that, especially now with the component pricing crisis and everything like that. They're going to stick to the base model as close as possible. And a few weeks ago, when Nintendo announced this new digital physical pricing split, I covered in a video that on that day, Walmart had pre-orders up for the physical copies of Yoshi and the Mysterious Book for $60 instead of $70. So right out of the gate, retailers of the physical copies said, absolutely not. We are not charging you more money, because now Walmart and Target and these other retailers who sell physical games are now competing with Nintendo's digital product that is cheaper on day one. How are they supposed to compete with that? In this economy, people are just going to go for the digital option because it's $10 cheaper, right? So maybe we'll see that again here, where physical retailers just say, no, Nintendo, you're not pulling that shit again. We're selling it for 70, and maybe they'll just order fewer copies, right? Like, that's what a lot of these retailers are going to end up doing if these units aren't moving at the higher price. And why would they? And unfortunately, for those of us that like to collect physical media, this just means that Nintendo is going to sell more and more digital copies over the course of the Switch 2's life, which is going to push physical copies farther and farther down their priority list. It's going to mean game key cards are here to stay, and that's just a future that unfortunately is probably coming, and I'm not happy about it. But yeah, physical tax confirmed. There's no more debate about that. It is the unfortunate reality here that Nintendo is just charging you more for the physical copy of the game. Open and shut case. Objectively, that's what's happening, and I think everybody kind of knew that was going to be the case, but now we have official confirmation of that. And the thing too about Fire Emblem is, like, it is a beloved franchise, right? Don't get me wrong, it's been around for a very long time. It's a very profitable franchise. People love Fire Emblem, but Fire Emblem is kind of bleeding players as a fan base. I mean, if you just look at the sales numbers of Fire Emblem games over the years, Fire Emblem on the 3DS sold about 1 million units worldwide. Path of Radiance sold 500,000. Radiant Dawn on the Wii sold 500,000. The 3DS, however, with its massive install base, did pretty well for Fire Emblem. We had Awakening selling 2.3 million, Fates selling 3 million, and then moving to the Switch, hype was real for Three Houses selling 4 million. Fire Emblem Engage, however, selling 1.6 million. Okay, so who knows? I mean, maybe the peak is behind us with the 3DS and Switch, or maybe the Switch 2 is going to sell really well. I do think it will sell really well just objectively, but again, with a smaller install base of the Switch 2 compared to the Switch 1, and then tacking on top of that a higher price point for the physical edition here, like, I don't know, I just feel like this isn't the franchise that you would want to try to bleed dry because you want to prop Fire Emblem up as like, this is one of the big games of the year, and like it is, right? So don't you want as many people to buy it as possible? I don't know, but really the Switch 2 has had a value proposition problem with their games since actually day one, since the launch of the Switch 2 and Mario Kart World. This is something else that was noticeably absent from Nintendo's Direct, but they charge $80 for Mario Kart World, and a lot of people going into the Switch 2's life, myself included, thought, okay, well, you know, they're charging 80, but it's a game that's going to be constantly updated and they're going to give a bunch of new DLC and a bunch of new stuff, and like really, like there's been very minor upgrades to Mario Kart World, especially the world, right? Like there's still not a great reason to play the open world portion of Mario Kart World. I mean, like, what are we talking about? That's the world part of Mario Kart World. It's in the title, and it's the part that people care about the least, and they're not updating it, and we're not seeing like big DLC for the game that is, as of recording, the best-selling game on Switch 2 and the highest priced game on Switch 2. And the games that they have released DLC for, they're charging kind of a lot of money for this DLC. Like I said earlier in the video, a $35 Pokemon Pokopia expansion pass is half the price of the entire game. So this is now a Pokemon spin-off that costs $105 for the complete package. This is exactly the same thing we saw with Legend ZA. And again, this expansion pass is being launched just 3 months after the game came out, which means a lot of this expansion pass content was already completed when the game launched. So they are intentionally cutting content from games and selling it back to you just a few months later for half the price of the whole game. This is what Nintendo does when they know they have a hit on their hands. They try to milk the fan base as much as humanly possible, even if the prices are astronomical for what you're getting. And it was funny because a lot of people saw the announcement for Pokopia and they were so fast to run to Pokemon's defense saying, it's actually a free DLC. Actually, it's free. It's not free. Okay, using the dive mechanic is free, but the content is $35. So once again, it's the same playbook as Legend ZA, and it's the same playbook we saw with Donkey Kong Bonanza, right? Donkey Kong Bonanza had the Emerald Rush or whatever that gameplay mode was. They released after the game came out. It was like 2 months after the game launched or whatever, and it was like what, a $20 or $30 DLC? Yeah, $20 for this DLC, and it came out right after the game launched. Okay, so clearly cut content, which pushes a $70 game up to a $90 game. Okay, so it's like Nintendo is getting you coming and going, right? They're trying to squeeze every ounce of profit out of you up front with the higher price of some of these games with that variable pricing model, and then once the game is confirmed a hit, they're like, okay, sell them something again, sell them that stuff we cut from day one, and they charge a ridiculous amount for it, right? So to call back to what I said earlier in the video, these are the things that the investors saw coming down the pipeline from Nintendo, and they're just not interested. These are not what they want to see for the future of Nintendo. This is not what they want, and it's also not what gamers want objectively. Do you want day one cut content that you have to then pay half the price of the game for just 3 months later? Do you want to pay a higher price for the physical cartridge that was industry standard for like 40 years? Physical games now cost more than the digital counterpart, and like, look, I get that there's costs involved to manufacturing the games, but again, that was industry standard for 40 years. You are betraying the customers that have made you what you are for literally your entire life. And then on top of that, the big reveal is a remake of a game from 1998, which is great, but that's not supposed to be the meat of the show. That's supposed to be a really delicious side dish, something else. That's like the one more thing, right? And even that, being a safe pick, has had lots of different controversies around not only the lore, but the art style of the game itself. So the real question that I want to leave you here with is Nintendo actually in trouble with their current pipeline? Because clearly they're leaning heavily on nostalgia to hold us over until the actual new stuff, and we don't even know what that is or when it's coming, and they're squeezing the prices as high as they can to get every nickel and dime out of the consumers that have already given them $500+ for their new console, which is the highest price Nintendo has ever charged for a new console, and the price is only going up in September by another $50. But anyway, if you made it to the end of the video, please consider dropping a thumbs up on it. It really does help out the channel a ton, and you might think you're subscribed because you've seen a bunch of my videos, but you're actually not. Double check down below.